world feels a bit toxic and blah these days, doesn't it? The same old people coming up with the same old solutions for big problems that still don't work. We need to change the game. Well, welcome to Women Advancing. Join me, host Kate Byrne, in this dynamic bi-weekly podcast, bringing together female founders, funders, and thought leaders. Listen to the people driving change, how they got there, how you can help, and yep, how you might just be the next one to advance. Proof that all ships rise with women at the helm. That's what happens when Women Advance with Kate Byrne. Yael Grushka-Cockayne, who's a professor and senior associate dean for professional degree programs at University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. Yael has such a fascinating background, spending time being raised in both the U.S. and in Israel, working around the globe, both from a terms of education and also her professional experience, before landing back in her beloved roots of academia, where she really, truly shines. She has been known as a lifelong tutor. It's been something that started from when she was young. And she really relied a lot on her perseverance that got her to where she is today. And where is that? By shifting from a professor to the hallowed halls of administration as well, in an highly regarded academic institution, no small feat. Also leading the way in AI research and so much more. So what else more? Well, you have to listen. Yael Grushka-Cockayne, professor and senior associate dean for professional degree programs at University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. Whew, lots to say there. Welcome to Women Advancing.
Thank you so much, Kate. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you for all your efforts pushing this initiative forward.
No, thank you so much. And especially, where do you all who are listening hear what Yael's done? It's there's a lot of, I'm going to say, pioneering taking place in a very steady and intentional way. So may we all take a page out of her playbook, which we're going to hear a little bit about that shortly. But before we go down all that path,
yes,
let's start with how you even got to where you are and your whole career journey overall. Like, what sparked this whole passion of yours?
Well, I think it's a little bit cliche for faculty to say, when I was a little child, which, I think many faculty like to say, but it is true. My dad was a professor, so you can point to him as a very influential person in my life. I always wanted to be a teacher. I always was a teacher. Many of my friendships were formed based on me being assigned to tutor people, and then we became lifelong friends and so on. So it's always been in there, in me. And I was in Scouts and an instructor, and every single step along the way, I did military service. I was an instructor in military service. Everything that I did, I kind of ended up with a kind of teaching role, I would say. And then when I got to my undergrad, I did teaching. I was kind of highlighted or spotted as a potential with a good ability to be a teacher, because I have an ability to explain complex ideas. But then I also got to do some research as part of my undergrad, and I really enjoyed it. And I think that those two things sat there for me, good in the classroom and excited about the research. And so after a while in the business world, I decided that my calling was really back in academia, which got me back to where I am today. So
Yael, share with everybody too where you grew up. Where was this taking place?
So I grew up in Israel. I was born in the United States and I moved to Israel as a young child. I grew up there in Jerusalem, and my mom's American, my dad was Israeli, so we were back and forth. Growing up as a academics child, we did a few sabbaticals. So I have quite an international upbringing, but definitely did my schooling years in Israel, did my military service there, and then did my undergrad, my industrial engineering degree there. But then pretty much upon graduation, I left, and I have been living away ever since. So for 25 years now, I've been, around the world, first in the Silicon Valley working for a while. Then I did my grad school, master's and PhD in London. And then at Darden here in Charlottesville for the past 15, 16 years now. So Yeah.
Which is terrific, which gives you such a really interesting, I think, broad, wide faceted window into, I mean, you kind of are able to look at a lot of these different subjects and just in the classroom too, from with what I call dragonfly eye. Got all sorts of different perspectives, which is really, really fortunate, I think. So it sounds like, so your dad was a mentor. Yay.
Yeah, for sure.
Are there any others? And are there any today that kind of fuel your fire?
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I have many amazing mentors, both personally and professionally. Definitely, as you point to, my dad and several of his colleagues that have, seen me evolve over the years from a young individual. Some of my friends, parents who have been helpful in giving me pointers along the way to things that I would flourish in. But probably most recently and professionally, my advisor for my PhD. So I got my PhD from the London Business School, and Professor Bert de Rijk, who is currently the dean in Singapore, he definitely is a mentor. He's been always very encouraging and supportive of my aspirations and my desires and my research interests. And we've really enjoyed working together, especially when it comes to work and research that is really relevant to practice. We've done a bunch of consulting projects together that have been research oriented with a lot of aerospace companies, aviation organizations, Heathrow Airport and the like, and the pharma sector. And so he's really been a mentor professionally for me over the years, and we're very close still, and I'm very proud of that relationship. And most recently here, there's several of my Darden colleagues have been really mentors, each in different ways, but Ed Freeman, a colleague of mine, Mark Lipson, another colleague, Venkat, our Senior Associate Dean for Faculty, and Scott, our Dean himself, has really been giving me many, many opportunities to kind of shine and learn what it is that I want to do when I grow up, and I appreciate that a great deal.
Well, and that kind of speaks too through your rise to the educational system. And now, here you are going from professor to administration. What was that like?
Yes, it's a good question.
Right? It's like going from single, sort of individual contributor to translate it into more of a corporate speak, right?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. It's been on one hand gradual, but also on the other hand instantaneous, which I'll try to explain how those two things make sense. Scott has been clever, as others have been around here, at giving me opportunities even before I was formally in the role. So like finding ways for me to start to learn the administrative corporate kind of perspective without actually too much exposure, I would say. And so like he invited me to become the faculty representation on our foundation board, which allowed me to be a board member, understanding, strategic board responsibility, fiduciary responsibility and the like, and kind of having that outside perspective on what the school has to do in order to be successful. I've always been very engaged and very hands-on in what I do, even without a formal role. So really engaged with the students, really engaged with my colleagues. And so stepping into administration gave me the permission to do that, I would say. And that felt really good, that I'm finally getting the recognition and the stature to meet where my energy was going in any event. A few of my colleagues, one of my colleagues often taught me before tenure the statement, I look forward to the day that I can say yes, right? When you're before tenure, you're encouraged to focus on your research, focus on things that you need to do as an individual contributor. And so I was fortunate to indeed say yes to all those things once I got tenure and once I was promoted to full professor, because now I can really kind of enjoy and indulge in those activities. It's been mostly pretty seamless, meaning I feel like I have the same relationships with some of my colleagues that I've always had, and I bring the same. I think I try to bring my same authentic self. But it is true that as an administrator, you see things that you don't see as an individual contributor. You learn, some aspects of the student life that maybe you weren't exposed to, some aspects of the faculty and your colleagues. Definitely get to work with amazing staff a lot more closely. And some staff now report to me, and I'm in charge of their livelihood, their promotion, and their success. And so that responsibility is new, or it was when I stepped into the role 5 years ago, and that was definitely a bit of an adjustment. We're not trained to be managers and to really do that. And so it's not obvious that is a simple transition, but I've enjoyed it a great deal. And I'm lucky to have incredible staff that I get to work with on a daily basis. And they really make and shape this role.
Well, and the truth is, it's also a transition not only into those responsibilities, but also the interpersonal shift that takes place when you go from being a peer to the boss lady.
Yes.
You point to that whole notion of this fabulous opportunity of getting to be on a board and understanding the fiduciary piece.
Yeah.
This is something that I've been really stressing to, mentees, women who were really trying to figure out how do I break that glass ceiling. You've got to run a P&L. You have
Yeah.
to be able to speak to the numbers. It doesn't mean you have to completely, you don't need to be a quantum mathematician by any means of the imagination, but you got to be able to be comfortable and understand the business of the business.
Yes, for sure. And I think that that's really important to have a budget to understand the main sources of our, our revenue and our costs and the implications and where do we stand and what are the tensions. Having that inside view into how the school is run is really important for my own credibility and also for the way that I do my job. And being on the board is just another dimension of that. But it helps because the business is complicated and not everybody has appetite to do every part of it exactly in the same way. My background is in operations research, industrial engineering. That's my bachelor's. Operations research is my master's. Management science and operations is my PhD. So I'm very much a logistics person. Even in the military, I was in ordnance. I was a logistics kind of person. So that's kind of a thread that you'll see throughout. And so I'm not shy of let's get stuff done. And I'm using polite words because this is a podcast. But so I'm not shy of that. My personal growth is recognizing indeed I know how to execute. I can do the numbers. For me, actually, personally, it's about how do I think bigger? How do I do the visionary stuff? That's where Scott's mentorship and kind of role comes in, which has been very helpful because as you know, I think, and as his reputation precedes him, like he is a very visionary dean. He leaves the operations to us, which sometimes can be frustrating, but it is definitely true. And so understanding what does it mean to have a visionary leader? Where can I be inspired by that vision or create my own vision? What does that look like? And then justifying that against how things have to get done in order to meet that vision. Those are things that I think I'm learning and I continue to learn. And my suspicion is that one role and longevity in one role is probably not enough for that. I probably need different roles to see different parts of the business to give me more of that. But I think that that's part of what's exciting for me and not something that you always get to do as an individual faculty.
Well, yeah. And you know what's interesting? I'd never really thought of it this way. I think of people such as yourself. I've got a couple of people who had this gift. One of my daughters has this. And it's, you mentioned earlier, being able to take complex concepts and explain them very easily and simply. And in a way, I think of that also as being someone who's able to communicate and also is good mathematically, poet and quant. And I hadn't thought of that in terms of leadership being visionary and executionary.
Yeah. Yeah. And you need to know your strengths. And if you don't have them, then you need to find your partners or your team that does complement you. And the same thing is true for writing. So like back to your previous point, like I know that I can do math, but I'm not like the most sophisticated statistician. I can do some stats, I can do some math, but I'm not the kind of mathematician in all scenarios. So for me, my value to any co-authorship kind of relationship that I have, and I have many different ones, I typically play a role of that kind of translator, somebody who takes the complex mathematics, can understand them, or can ask the right questions to really understand them well. Sometimes I can implement them too, but I also have the spectrum and the breadth to kind of take those and to write it up in a way that is really, really clean and accessible and is kind of a joy to read and makes it kind of impactful, because then who reads it understands it and can use it and leverage it in the future, which makes the work much more impactful longer term. That's what I bring to co-authorship's relationship. And so if I'm brought in as the mathematical guru, I don't know that that's going to kind of benefit our team. I think that I need to come in, and especially for my ability to connect different work streams, to do the translation, to write well, to distill, to ask really good questions, and to kind of get the mess away from the main picture. In my co-authorships, that's what I bring. In my leadership here at Darden, I know that I need to be triggered by people who can take me in different directions and different scenarios. And it's all about how we find people around us that can complement our own skill set.
So true. So what advice would you give to future generation of female academics if they wanted to kind of break in, or that, I don't know if I would call it that, like glass ceiling, whatever, but just get position oneself so that they are standing front in line when these opportunities arise.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the advice is, again, a tad banal in the sense that there's a lot of things that I think women get told around ways to, to break that glass ceiling in different settings. That is true everywhere. Like, for instance, Erica James, Dean at Wharton, told me, she said, the truth is that, or she said in a forum that I was witnessing, and I have never forgotten it. She said, when you get that first offer for a job, you think, oh, I'm not ready for this, or I'm not qualified for this, or I don't have the experience for this. Well, of course you don't. Like, it's your first opportunity, but everybody needs a first opportunity, because then there will be a second and a third. And so reminding yourself that, yes, you have to stand into things and take a little bit of a leap of faith, and say it's okay if this is not my perfect performance. It's going to be good enough to learn, and I'm going to give it my best shot. And then the next one will be easier or different in its own right, and pivot from there. So I think that that's definitely true for everything in academia. Administration is true, but it's also true for walking into a new classroom and giving yourself some grace and saying, I'm going to try it because I want to learn and grow personally. And that means that it's going to be bumpy along the way. Not everything is going to be tightened up from the get-go. Some papers are going to get rejected.
It's just the way it is.
It's just the way it is. And you're just going to have to write another paper and try and learn from it and make that next paper even better.
It's that whole notion of imposter syndrome. Does it really exist? Because to your point, you're starting something new. Of course, you don't feel like you belong there, but you haven't done it before. So
correct.
They see something in you. So if they have faith, you better.
You're going to have to start with something. Yeah,
exactly.
You're going to have to start with something. So that would be my advice. Other advice for women that I think is really helpful. I was told pretty early on, actually during my PhD days, by someone a few years kind of more advanced than me in her career, it's all about infrastructure, meaning you got to get your life into a place where you can let your brain focus on what you're doing. So what does that mean to me? I need to know that my kids are happy to the best of my ability. I need to be thinking about the right environment for them, the right way for them to be independent and satisfied, that I don't have to worry about. I'm always going to worry about them, but I need to know that they're doing what they should be doing and what they want to be doing. So it's kind of momentarily, I can let that burden kind of sit there on the shelf for a few hours. I need to know that my house is being taken care of, whatever that means. I need to know that, like, I need an infrastructure in order to function, because if everything is a mess around me, it's very hard for me to kind of give myself into my job. And so that's been like little things. Do I need to pick up the dry cleaning? No, somebody can bring it to me. I know it sounds silly, but like that's the level where I'm kind of like debating, right? Like if it takes something off my list, I don't have to worry about it. Right.
I'm right there with you. It was one of the first things I very quickly figured out. There were going to be certain parts of life that I was completely going to delegate because, one, I wasn't necessarily particularly great at it, but two, it was such an energy and time suck, so that nothing good was going to come from it if I held on. And that's where I also think we start, in an interesting way, start seeding our leadership chops, because you have to be humble to say, guess what? Nope, can't do it all. So guess what, Lucky Duck? You get to do that part. Have fun with that. And then move forward. So you talked about asking the right good questions. And that's a delicious lead into, I know you're working more with AI.
Yes.
And the whole notion of AI, it's all, the query, the power of the prompt. So I took that string, I went for it. See, I'm so focused in there.
Good for you.
Talk a little bit of, so how did you find yourself here? I think it's fantastic because there is such a gap with women and AI.
Yeah, interesting. It's funny, definitely. I know that a lot of your passion is also about advancing women and in STEM. I will say that, funny enough, the past couple of years, maybe because there's so much else going on, I feel like women in AI, specifically this question of women in AI, is being asked or concerned. There are less concern than maybe I heard of 10 years ago about like women in data science or women in computer science. Like I feel like to some degree, and I hope it's not complacency, but I think there are more prominent women that are in the field, which is giving me some enthusiasm. And having it a non-conversation is probably the best world we can live in, right? Like it shouldn't be an issue because there's enough variety that we don't have to debate it. Personally, in a way, it's new, but in a way, for me, it's not that new. All those years ago, when I studied industrial engineering, I focused on information systems. And so, yes, it was like pre 2K. So it was like in preparation for 2K, we were all kind of nervous that all the computers were going to explode. And so I got into information systems. I sold enterprise resource planning systems in the Silicon Valley for a while. So I was in software and business related software for a long time, and including learning, coding and programming and some artificial intelligence and so on. So it's been kind of in my toolkit for a while. And then for the bulk of my professor years, in terms of my research, I've focused on forecasting and what it means to work with probabilistic forecasts and how do you aggregate the wisdom of the crowd. So multiple forecasts from multiple experts. So I've done a lot of forecasting, especially in the human expert arena. But so AI seems very natural for me to be, because a lot of AI is just predictions. It's very good predictions. It's machine-driven predictions, but it's accuracy in predictions. And you take everything we know from humans and you take my, knowledge of information systems, you put those together, and it seems a very comfortable way for me to arrive at AI. It's not totally disconnected from stuff that I've been doing in the past. And so that's where I find myself today. And I'm really excited around all the new opportunity and development with the new computing power and the great models and the companies that are investing. I mean, it's mind-boggling. It's scary. There's a lot of open questions, but it's exciting. So
I think so too. And you're the first person, I think, who actually even integrated the notion that all the information, it's crowdsourcing, and the humanity aspect behind the AI that's there. And hence, when you look at it that way, it's a collaborative tool.
Yep.
And by the way, you can also reject anything you get from it.
Of course.
At the end, which everybody, right? Which everyone always, on the one hand, everybody wants the answer, but then they don't want the accountability of saying, well, the computer told me to do it. Really? Are you sure about that one?
Yes. And I like how if you challenge people, and some of my colleagues here at Darden so really do some really interesting work around, if you challenge people, there are situations where we really prefer that a machine tells us what to do. And either we admit it or we don't admit it. And so I like how we're selective. Oh, what? We're going to be replaced with machines? Well, you know what? Hell yes. And I actually prefer it because then the error rate will be lower and I won't be worried about the poor person who's, hasn't slept for 15 hours, who is in the, air traffic control tower. So
yeah, so true. But so there's opportunity, but what are some of the obstacles that you see still that are persisting for women in STEM? And what measures can we take to kind of dismantle them and help people kind of power through?
Yeah, it's a good question. So for one, I think some of the challenges for women, and I will try not to stereotype, right? Because everything I say can be caveated because, no two women are the same and my challenge is different from your challenge. But some of the challenges for women are kind of challenges for academia in general, which is the pace. Like things are happening really, really fast. And there's almost like a legitimacy, I would say, of doing things that are a little bit half-baked. And that sometimes goes against some tendencies. Like I need to think a little bit, or I need to capture my thoughts in a little way, or like when I code, I need to internalize things, so I go a little bit slower. Like some of us have different preferred paths of learning and allow us to kind of feel comfortable and innovate in our own right. But it's almost like there's no patience for that anymore, right? Like you have to move, you have to be quick, you have to be fast. And that is something that I think some people find intimidating and a little bit challenging. Now, with that, it also, hand in hand with that, this ability to kind of say, okay, it's good enough. Like, okay, let's just submit this paper as it is because time is of essence. It's good enough. And yes, it could be better, but we can't, constantly be sitting here and perfecting it because by the time we finish it, it'll be passé. Understanding that is going to be really, really critical for people who want to be players. And going back to your question from before, asking really good questions. I think a lot of women are great at asking amazing questions. We're not always encouraged to do so.
Use your voice. Yeah.
And not always encouraged to do that questioning in a way that doesn't get criticized in and of itself. Oh, why are you nitpicking, or why are you giving me a hard time? It's like, no, I'm asking questions. And so finding a way to be inquisitive and ask questions, because you need it, as you said, a lot of this prompting is relevant, but also in order to understand fast new technology that is evolving, you need to ask a lot of great questions, and to feel confident to keep being the one saying, oh, I want to ask a question, I want to raise my hand. And you need to do that. You have to do that. You have to do that to be a player. And that is not always something that I think is natural for everybody.
Right. I was going to say, ask those questions unapologetically, because at the end of the day, if you don't, you won't have the information. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You will not land correctly. And something that I have learned repeatedly is the minute I ask a question, so everyone around me had the same question.
Of course.
So it's like, all right, think of it as a chance to be courageous and brave for the group.
Right. I say this, and I know, again, I'm not the only one that says it, but it's definitely true that in a classroom setting, right, like let's take an average or a lecture setting or a group setting, if you have a question, typically, 10 other people in the room have it. So just give yourself confidence and ask that question. Now, you have to be concentrating on the conversation. You have to be present. You have to engage. You have to listen really, really well. Active listening is as important, because where it becomes a little bit problematic is when people are using that as an excuse, but asking the question they want to ask and not sensing the vibe. So you still need that EQ. You still need that kind of social orientation to follow conversations, to add and to contribute, and not to take away from it.
And that's another thing I think so often is making space and taking space. So when you do have something to add, making sure that it is in fact additive, as opposed to trying to demonstrate, I'm smart too, because you don't have to do that. We all went to school with those people who someone would ask a question, the teacher would answer it, wait for it, 1, 2, 3, Bueller. Another person would ask the same question.
Same question, right.
I'm like, oh my God, she just answered that.
Yeah.
And everyone would say, oh, that's such a good question. I'm like, no, it's not. We just went through that. It's a dumb question.
Yep.
We heard it. Well, so what's been one of the most surprising or unexpected lessons you've learned throughout your work?
Good question. Lessons personally or professionally?
Both. You pick.
Oh, geez.
I'm sure the truth is, to your point earlier, we make such a point of trying to make sure that those around us are safe and comfortable. You kind of, they are
hand in hand. Yeah, they are hand in hand. Yeah. I've learned definitely throughout my administrative role, for sure. I've learned that there's a lot of value in cohesive teams and how they show up. They can disagree. We can spend hours, and I will challenge my colleagues and my team members one-on-one or in a small group setting to a large, degree. That's totally fine. But when you are in the bigger setting, there's this notion of, I think I've heard it being expressed as like, the team has to be the team, and it has to present as a team when it's in a larger group. There has to be a cohesiveness, not, oh, I disagreed with this, but I went with the committee's vote. Like, I find that to be slightly problematic. You can be genuine, you can express, the concerns. You don't have to hide your opinions, but I think that it's really hard for a team to function and lead when it's being pulled in different directions and people can see the cracks, because then everybody's just busy, widening those cracks as opposed to progressing. And then everybody gets distracted from the main agenda. And so for me, that is really apparent how that happens. And I can see teams that do that better than others. And finding those mechanisms to express your personal take versus the team's perspective is really important. So when you craft your leadership team, finding ways for those voices to be heard and yet still presenting as a cohesive team is fundamental.
I was just going to say, I can remember early days, someone said to me, in order to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower. Yes. And it goes to that whole notion of, yes, disagree, fine, debate, but then at the end of the day, align.
Yep, exactly. Exactly right.
Forward and onward we go.
Exactly right. And I mentioned this in the context of like what we talk about in the classroom is active listening. I mentioned that that's a really tough skill because you need to be okay with sitting back and listening to other people talk, and not just letting them talk and ignoring it, but listening so that you understand them. A long time ago, over 10 years ago now, 11 years ago, actually, just as we speak, I led a group of students on a NOLS trip. Have you ever done a NOLS trip? I can see this something that you would love, actually.
No, what is it?
National Outdoor Leadership School. It's
Oh,
a
I would love that.
maybe you've heard of Outward Bound. I think they're
Yes, I
pretty.
have. Yeah.
So those are trips that you go on and you're like in the wilderness. There's a lot of like college level trips. We did a one for Darden for the MBAs, and it was only a 10-day trip. Some of these can be like 3 months long. I didn't have the bandwidth to do that, but 8 days was sufficient for me. Let me say, you're in the back country. There's no showers. There's no toilets. There, you're cooking all your own meal. You're schlepping everything on your shoulders. So 8 days was more than enough. But we went 13 students, myself and an alum who's now one of our board members here, and we spent 8 days in Arizona in
Oof,
January. It was it
beautiful.
was amazing. But one of the most valuable skills that you gain on that, every day there's a leader of the day. We're in small groups of five, walking and navigating, from maps and compasses and the like. And one of the most valuable personal lessons for me as I was like the only faculty there as an authority, but we had nose guides, but I was like a faculty, was actually forgetting that I'm the faculty, actually being an active follower, being a team member, not the leader, not somebody who like comes in and gives advice. No, I was just another team member, and I had to be good at being just another team member. And that wasn't that easy for me, but I really learned that it was valuable because I was distracting. My advice, like I shouldn't have been the leader, and I should have been a follower, and I needed to practice that. And so that is a dance, right? Like, how do you step up and lead, and how do you let other people lead, and what does that mean?
Well, and I think to your point, and then when you graduate, when you are then that leader, that makes it so much more, you're better able to build. What I experienced was I was better able to build a place where it was safe to ask questions, safe to have outcomes that we weren't expecting, otherwise known as mistakes. We call
Yeah.
them learnings, right? You know what I mean? It's like, it's okay to do that. And instead of having this sort of shame and blame culture, gotcha moments, everyone's like, okay, cool. What did we learn? Okay, great. Let's keep trying. What would we have done? So everything becomes less
Yeah,
triggering and
exactly.
electric. So it's
Exactly.
incredibly important. So when you're looking at taking that, now you're looking at projects that you're working on, what's got you most jazzed?
So we have a new institute for AI. I think you were alluding to that, and I have a director or co-director role in that. So I'm super excited right now around what we're doing with AI. And when I say what we're doing with AI is what we're actively doing, but more exciting perhaps is what we could possibly do with AI, both in our own instruction. So, like, what do we do with it in our own classroom here? But also, how do we think about it in terms of shaping what our students are going to do when they go out and become, the MBA leader of tomorrow, those managers, those leaders in organizations? How do we carve out, or how do we help them identify what are the possibilities there? And so, we had a really exciting conference in December, asking a lot of great questions around AI leadership and what we call the value chain of ethical AI. So, like, how do you add value? Where does value get basically disrupted or destructed from questionable ethical issues, but also how do you just lead with that mindset, and what does it mean around how we teach? And so I'm super excited about some of our efforts around that. We have some faculty experimenting with new pedagogy, new curriculum, new cases, and our students are game to join in with that. Some more than others, but some of them, want to learn more. Some of them are learning more and kind of being bold and leading the way, and we need to find ways to embrace that. And so it's not that I have all the solutions quite yet, but I definitely am excited about the direction.
Working on finding it.
Yeah.
Are there certain like greatest opportunities for women that you see in that world moving forward?
Yeah,
Via
I mean,
academia, any of it, AI, all of it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I mean, women can take part in any part of the process that they're interested in. I know exceptional leaders both in business and in academia that are at the more technical kind of algorithmic level. Leaders in organizations that are asking really tough questions around the newest technology, boldly kind of leading the development of new tools and new models, all the way to implementing in the business world, to leading the way and thinking about, working in the White House or in government and policy around Bill of Rights, AI Bill of Rights, and so on. So, like, I do think that there are opportunities for women everywhere from the policy, academia, and business. It's just about us, embracing it and not thinking that there are better or worse places for women to find themselves. The more women we have along the way, the better we'll all be, just because we want a great diversity everywhere. We want representation, and not just for the sake of representation. I want to be clear. One of the things that we talk a lot about in the wisdom of the crowd research that I do is around the value of diversity from a very technical perspective, better forecasts. So you can show mathematically that if you take opinions, multiple opinions, and you average them, you'll be better off than taking somebody on average. And so, like, you can show mathematically that more perspectives are valuable for the development of these algorithms, for the implementation of these algorithms, and even for conceptualizing policy. And so the more we can encourage women to follow their background and their strengths, and to position themselves where they're strong, where their general tendencies are, I think the better we will be. Yeah.
And not even question it. Are there any like personal philosophies that you think kind of contribute to your success, or what advice would you give your younger self knowing what you know now?
Good question. First, never underestimate perseverance. I am a strong believer in perseverance. I am not the smartest, I'm not the fastest, I'm not the strongest, but I am reliable as heck. I mean, you know that you can find me. You know that I will do everything I can to be there for you. I'm pretty predictable in many different ways. Not in a boring sense, but just like I'm a runner. I'm devoted to my running. I'm devoted to my teaching. I'm devoted to my work. Like, I am consistent, and I am devoted, and I am ruthless in that day in, day out. And I think that really helps me. It helps me keep a pace that my pace is a little bit too much. So maybe I should calm it down a little bit, but it helps me have a rhythm. I'm a rhythm person, and that rhythm really, really benefits me. Like, I need that kind of in my life. And so I get to a place, I fly a lot, I travel a lot. When I get to a place, I go out for a run. I anchor myself in order to get into a routine, because that is really good for me. And that perseverance plays out well professionally in my mind. Like, it's helped me. I haven't always been successful, as I mentioned. Courses haven't always been that good. I've failed. Papers get rejected. I didn't really do good on some of the standardized testing early on. I also have certain kind of aspects of dyslexia, whatever it is. But persevering and like trying again, and just like no extremes. Like, don't do everything to crazy amounts, and then kind of put every single thing I do but do it regularly and religiously. That's been very good for me. And so, yeah, perseverance. And I think I always had it. So maybe my younger self would laugh at me because it was there too. But it's definitely played out well for me over time. Yeah.
Well, I think one, too, you have great personal accountability to yourself.
Yes. Yes.
Despite all the other people might say, oh, go do this, do this. It's like, no, I know I need to ground myself and get myself there.
Yes.
Then I can really give. But you also have a tremendous amount of energy. And
yes.
I too have this. I share this with you. And I know for myself, I need to do that, because if I don't harness that, and if I don't also, frankly, if I don't work out or I don't burn it off in that way, all hell will break loose. It's just an ugly thing there, but no one will be spared.
Yeah. Yeah, and also there's a little bit in me somehow. I think maybe people will say that this is not true, but my feeling is that there's a little bit of, I only take myself so seriously, like the research, the teaching, the classroom, even to some degree in my personal life. And I love my family, and I love my mom, my sisters, and I'm really dedicated to them. Like, it's also about, like, I can't there's a tendency to overthink, I think. Definitely, I hit 50 this year. And so a lot of people have a lot to say about being over 50. But like, there's this whole notion of being in your head and kind of like going through scenarios. Like, yes, that's going to happen. And it happens. And I let that happen to some degree. But I can't take myself too seriously, because at some point, it's just not like it then becomes harmful. And so I need to know how to release. And with that release comes a little bit of like life is a roller coaster. Like, you got to laugh and smile, because yes, not all problems are welcome, and some things really do need to get solved, and I will work hard to solve them. But in the moment, it's just not going to be the end of the world, because it can't be. Like, otherwise I won't wake up tomorrow. And so I need to kind of put things in perspective, and appointed me to be Senior Associate Dean the last weekend in May 2020. Now, if you think about what was going on that weekend around everything social, justice in the United States, COVID, grumpy students, grumpy faculty, grumpy world. It was just a tough time. And I learned pretty quickly, like the day after, you gotta take things with a pinch of salt and not too seriously, because otherwise it will haunt you. And so that was really helpful.
Yeah, that's sage advice for everybody. Yeah, I'm going to come back. We're going to continue this conversation because there are a few other inner depth things. But thank you so much on behalf of myself, Women Advancing, and all our listeners. And I just know I cannot wait to see so many of your students stand up and spread their wings, and how that results in a world that flourishes for all.
Thank you so much.
So really appreciate everything you had to share.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and I'm excited about all the things that you're going to do with all of your efforts as well.
Thanks for listening. May this episode inspire you to move forward. Be sure to go to iTunes, Spotify, katebyrne.co, that's KATEBYRNE.co, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and listen to even more episodes. Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, may we raise them. And be sure to meet them on the next Women Advancing. Ta till next time.